So my name is Dan Markowski. I live in Michigan in the United States, and um, this is from a short story I did last year called The Princess and the Spider. Hans examined his prison. It had a domed top inches above his head and reminded him of the type of cage the nobles used to house their exotic birds. He grabbed hold of the metal bars and shook them to no avail. The sudden movement made his head swim and forced him to stop moving. He slumped back against the bars and kept still, waiting for his head to feel right. After a while, his senses returned to normal, or at least as normal as a person could feel after getting bludgeoned by a rock. He closed his eyes and tried to think of what to do. That's when he felt something on his bare shoulder. It had a light touch and reminded him of a blade of grass. No, not quite. There was more heft to it than that, and it felt fuzzy. The feeling disappeared, then it came back. This repeated several times. He slowly turned his head over his shoulder and opened his eyes. Then they almost bulged out of his head. Hans stared into the beady eyes of a hairy brown spider about the size of his hand. It clung to the outside of the bars, and using a front leg, it reached out and tapped him again. He screamed at the top of his lungs and lurched forward. He lashed out and caused the cage to start swinging back and forth. "Ah, my other visitor is awake finally," a raspy voice called out from the shadows. "But you had best silence yourself. I don't know how many more blows from a rock your head can withstand." The voice shook Hans free from his terror caused by the spider, which had disappeared from sight. He stuck a hand through the bars and instinctively reached for his boot dagger that was no longer there. "No, no, I wasn't about to overlook that little detail," the voice said with a chuckle. The feeling of nausea returned after Hans' flurry of movement. It was only through force of will he managed to keep himself sitting upright. The owner of the voice emerged from behind a pile of stacked crates against the far wall of the cave. A wiry man with skin like a presented himself. He didn't look very threatening in his eyes that made him feel uneasy. He glared at the man. "Who are you?" "Does it matter?" The man raised his eyebrows in amusement. "You are behind bars. I am not. Where are your priorities?" He chuckled again. Hans likened the sound to that of two sheets of dry paper rubbing together. "I like to know who I'm dealing with, and I'll have you know I'm a soldier in the Royal Army. My lord would be most displeased if he knew I was being held captive here." The man laughed, an awful grating sound. "Very well, you may call me Olan," he said with a mock bow. "And I already know about you, Hans," he continued with a smile. "A runaway soldier who kidnapped a young lass with the help of your friend." Hans perked up at the mention of Rolf. "Long gone by now, I wager," Olan said while trying without success to stifle a snicker. "After I gave you a bump on the noggin, he bolted as fast as he could. A shame, actually." Hans gritted his teeth in frustration, but he couldn't say the news surprised him. Rolf was an idiot and a coward. A thought occurred to him. It was a long shot, but worth a try. "Won't you please release me? I promise to make you a rich man." "Rich? Why, I am already rich in my own way. I have no need for any form of currency you can offer. Besides, I regret to inform you that you won't be leaving this cave," he stated matter-of-factly. Hans gulped. "Why? I've done nothing to you." Sweat was beginning to form on his brow. "I don't see what you can gain from murdering me if that's your intention." "You are of great use to me, more than you can imagine," Olan said while rubbing his hands together. "But we can talk about that later, lad. Right now I'd like to thank you for bringing Princess Elise to my humble home. Such a delight. She's asleep at the moment. She took quite a tumble back there, so I gave her an herbal concoction to help her rest." Hans watched Olan prance over to the fire and pluck something from the black cauldron. Elise stirred, but did not wake as he danced around her merrily. She rolled over in her sleep, and Hans saw what appeared to be a cloth bandage on her arm. "What happened to our arm?" "Oh, it was merely a scratch, nothing serious. Now here, my friend, eat up." Olan tossed a chunk of cooked meat through the bars while being careful not to stand too close. Hans grabbed the meat and sniffed it. It was nice and warm and smelled delicious. He looked at his captor with a raised eyebrow. "Why feed me if you plan to kill me?" Olan shook his head and slapped his knee as if Hans had told a funny joke. "Too soon, too soon. The time will come to let you in on my plan for you, but for now you must eat and build your strength up." If Olan planned on keeping him alive for a while, that meant he had time to devise an escape. The fool would regret it. Giving Olan a fake smile, he took a bite. Hans had a restless night. The pounding in his head and ribs prevented him from any sort of relaxation. At last his body couldn't stay awake any longer and he drifted into slumber. His sleep was short-lived. Now, see here, what you did earlier, that wasn't very friendly. The voice sounded close, but somehow small at the same time. It didn't belong to Olan. This one was more gruff. It brought back unpleasant memories of an old drill sergeant Hans once had. He opened his eyes and looked around. The fire had burned out and night had thrown its black cloak over the cave, leaving him unable to detect anybody. Who's there? He whispered. No response. After several minutes of waiting, he began to wonder if he imagined the voice. Soon after, sleep took him. And that's where I'll stop.